Hi, here in this video, let's discuss the novel The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. This engaging summary presents the analysis of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, in which the celebrated Belgian detective Hercule Poirot is forced out of retirement to investigate the murder of a wealthy industrialist. He soon comes to realize that in this case, appearances are deceptive and everyone is hiding something. His brilliant deductions eventually lead him to unmask the murderer in a shocking twist that has stunned generations of readers. Let's look at the complete summary of
The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is a work of detective fiction by British writer Agatha Christie. First published in June 1926 in the United Kingdom by William Collins. Sons and in the United States by Dodd, Mead and Company. It is the third novel to feature Hercule Poirot as the lead detective. Poirot retires to a village near the home of a friend, Roger Ackroyd, to pursue a project to perfect vegetable marrows. Soon after, Ackroyd is murdered and Poirot must come out of retirement to solve the case. The novel was well received from its first publication. In 2013, the British Crime Writers Association voted it the best crime novel ever. It is one of Christie's best-known and most controversial novels. Its innovative twist ending having a significant impact on the genre. Howard Haycraft included it in his list of the most influential crime novels ever written. The short biography of Christie, which is included in 21st century UK printings of her books, calls it her masterpiece. Chief characters. Hercule Poirot is retired from his role as a private detective, but resumes his profession when requested to assist in the investigation. He is a friend of the victim. Dr. James Shepherd is the local doctor, Poirot's assistant in his investigations, and the novel's narrator. Inspector Davis is the local inspector for King's Abbot and the investigating officer. Inspector Raglan is the police inspector from the nearby larger town of Cranchester. Colonel Melrose is the chief constable for the county. Roger Ackroyd is the victim of the case. A wealthy businessman and widower, who is distressed by the recent death of the woman he wished to marry, Mrs. Ferrars. Mrs. Ferrars is a widow who was rumored to have poisoned her husband Ashley Ferrars, a mean alcoholic, commits suicide at the start of the novel. Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd is a widow of Roger's brother Cecil. She and her daughter have been living at Fernley Park for the past 2 years and are financially dependent on Roger. Flora Ackroyd is Ackroyd's niece, Cecil's daughter. Requests Poirot's help to investigate her uncle's murder. She is engaged to Ralph at her uncle's request, unaware her fiancé has already married Ursula Bourne. Captain Ralph Payton is Ackroyd's stepson from his late wife's previous marriage, referred to sometimes as his adopted son. Secretly married to Ursula Bourne, and the police's prime suspect in the murder. Major Hector Blunt is Ackroyd's friend, a big game hunter, a guest of the household. He is secretly in love with Flora, present when the body was found. Geoffrey Raymond is Ackroyd's secretary, a young and energetic man in his profession. Present when his employer's body was found. John Parker, Ackroyd's butler, claims to have not called out Shepherd to Fernley Park. The night of Ackroyd's murder, is present when the body was found. Elizabeth Russell is Ackroyd's housekeeper, an attractive woman for her age. Ursula Bourne is Ackroyd's parlour maid, a lady of nobility forced into service through poverty. She is secretly married to Ralph and is fired when she tells Ackroyd of this. Charles Kent is Russell's illegitimate son, a drug addict, recently arrived from Canada. He is encountered at Fernley Park skates by Shepherd on the night of the murder. Caroline Shepherd is Dr. Shepherd's older, spinster sister. She has a notable gift of staying informed on all activities in the village. Mrs. Folliot is Ursula's older sister, but concealed this fact when providing references for her to become a parlour maid of Ackroyd's. Mr. Hammond is Ackroyd's lawyer. Plot summary. The book's narrator, Dr. James Shepherd, introduces himself and explains these are his memoirs of a murder which happened in his town. In King's Abbot, wealthy widow Mrs. Ferrars unexpectedly commits suicide, distressing her fiancé the widower Roger Ackroyd. At dinner that evening in Ackroyd's home of Fernley Park, his guests include his sister-in-law Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd and her daughter Flora, big game hunter Major Blunt, Ackroyd's personal secretary Geoffrey Raymond, and Dr. James Shepherd, whom Ackroyd invited earlier that day. During dinner, Flora announces her engagement to Ackroyd's stepson, Ralph Peyton. After dinner, Ackroyd reveals to Shepherd in his study that Mrs. Ferrars had confided in him that she was being blackmailed over the murder of her husband. He then asks Shepherd to leave, wishing to read a letter from Mrs. Ferrars that arrives in the post, containing her suicide note. Once home, Shepherd receives a call and leaves for Fernley Park again, after informing his sister that Parker, Ackroyd's butler, has found Ackroyd murdered. But when Shepherd arrives at Fernley Park, Parker denies making such a call, yet he, Shepherd, Raymond and Blunt find Ackroyd dead in his study, stabbed to death with a weapon from his collection. Hercule Poirot, living in the village, comes out of retirement at Flora's request. She does not believe Peyton killed Ackroyd, despite him disappearing and police finding his footprints on the study's window. Poirot learns a few important facts on the case: all in the household, except parlour maid Ursula Bourne, have alibis for the murder, while Raymond and Blunt heard Ackroyd talking to someone after Shepherd left. Flora was the last to see him that evening. Shepherd met a stranger on his way home at Fernley Park's gates. Ackroyd met a representative of a dictaphone company a few days earlier. Parker recalls seeing a chair that had been in an odd position in the study when the body was found. That has since returned to its original position. The letter from Mrs. Ferrars has disappeared since the murder. Poirot asks Shepherd for the exact time he met his stranger. He later finds a goose quill and a scrap of starched cambric in the summer house, and a ring with the inscription "From R" in the backyard. Raymond and Mrs. Ackroyd later reveal they are in debt, but Ackroyd's death will resolve this as they stood to gain from his will. Flora admits she never saw her uncle after dinner. She was taking money from his bedroom. Her revelation throws doubts on everyone's alibis, and leaves Raymond and Blunt as the last people to hear Ackroyd alive. Blunt reveals he is secretly in love with Flora. Poirot calls a second meeting, adding Parker, the butler, Miss Russell, the housekeeper, and Ralph Peyton, whom he had found. He reveals that the goose quill is a heroin holder belonging to Miss Russell's illegitimate son, the stranger whom Shepherd met on the night of the murder. He also informs everyone that Ursula secretly married Peyton, as the ring he found was hers. It was discarded after Peyton chastised her for informing his uncle of this fact, which had led to the termination of her employment. Poirot then proceeds to inform all that he knows the killer's identity, confirmed by a telegram received during the meeting. He does not reveal the name, instead he issues a warning to the killer. When Poirot is alone with Shepherd, he reveals that he knows him to be Ackroyd's killer. Shepherd was Mrs. Ferrars' blackmailer and murdered Ackroyd to stop him knowing this. He suspected her suicide note would mention this fact, and so he took it after the murder. He then used a dictaphone Ackroyd had to make it appear he was still alive when he departed, before looping back to the study's window to plant Peyton's footprints. Poirot had noted an inconsistency in the time he mentioned for the meeting at the gates, as he wanted to be on the scene when Ackroyd's body was found. He asked a patient earlier in the day to call him sometime after the murder, so as to have an excuse for returning to Fernley Park. Poirot's telegram confirmed this. When no one was around in the study, Shepherd removed the dictaphone, and returned the chair that concealed it from view to its original place. Poirot tells Shepherd that all this information will be reported to the police in the morning. Dr. Shepherd continues writing his report on Poirot's investigation, the novel itself, admitting his guilt and wishing his account was that of Poirot's failure to solve Ackroyd's murder. The novel's epilogue serves as his suicide note. End of the summary. Thank you. Thank you.